do not use your ChatGPT free accounts. If you don't provide your employees with ChatGPT accounts or some other AI account, there's a very high chance that they'll just use their own, which is probably way worse.
Hello, welcome to Speech Sage podcast, where we talk about cutting edge health and AI. And I'm your host, Joseph, and I'm joined by Noah, who's the tech wizard and our CEO. And today we chose the topic of AI and cybersecurity.
Yeah, very important.
Yeah, and I think what's different about AI, and I guess its data structure, is that it uses a lot of vector database and embeddings. So a lot of people are not familiar with this, and I'm assume that this will have kind of a different cybersecurity implication. Can you walk us through the embeddings and how it works from text to embeddings and back to text?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think before we even get too far into the details, we have to define, okay, what is an embedding, right? And the way that it's used, again, there's different use cases. And if you want to be really pedantic with it, the way that the AI community uses the word embedding is specifically with reference to a particular set of floating point numbers that denotes a particular concept that some text is describing. Now, what does that mean? That's the precise term. That's not the term that we will necessarily use here. Because oftentimes the way that you use it and other people use it, it's the way that they think of the AI language model, because you understand that when a language model AI processes text, it's using numbers, right? And so what happens there is when you are writing down a thought, let's say you're writing a note to someone, you have to give instructions to your employee. Why do you write down the words?
Oh, so that I can remember.
Well, let's say you're passing the note on to someone. Why do you write down those notes?
Oh, so that I can communicate my thoughts without saying things.
So you can communicate your thoughts without saying things, right? Or maybe you can't physically, they're not in person, or they're going to come in the next day. But you, like, the goal that you already had in your brain, right? That goal, your intent did not happen right when you wrote. The physical act of writing the words did not produce that goal in your brain.
That's right.
You already had that. But your brain had to produce an output that could be deciphered by another human. Now, when your employee or whoever else reads that, again, those words themselves, by themselves, are very much meaningless, right? Like words, that's why if you grew up in America and you look at some Chinese, most Americans will not know how to read Chinese. You know how to read Korean, so you have it up there, right? But if you went to read probably Sanskrit, my guess is you would be completely confused. The characters would mean nothing to you. Now, if someone knows how to read that, obviously they make sense. Well, it's the same way with the language model. The way that we use English, the way that we use Korean or Chinese, makes sense because over the years, the language has evolved to give certain characters and syllables, and even the vocal part, the different phonemes and pronunciations, a meaning. And the way that you construct those different characters or phonemes together produces a concept that humans have agreed to represent something, whether that's an apple or to get your work done or whatever it is, a scolding. Now, language models and AIs, I'll use the word language model because it's a more precise term of AI, form of AI that we commonly use. It's the same thing. When you're actually talking to an AI and putting some text in, what's actually happening is the language model has been trained where if you give it language, such as English, text, whatever it may be, it's able to use what's called an embedder or an embedding layer of the model that will convert those actual characters, which don't really mean a whole lot technically, into something that's meaningful, that's a mathematical representation. So that's in the AI model. And a lot of times when people talk about an embedding, that is what they're referring to, is when you put those characters in, or those when you're talking to it and you're putting your speech in, it converts it into the embedding space. And the embedding space is where the AI actually works. And when humans, you and I, look at these embedding space, it's just a bunch of numbers and combination and linear algebra matrix multiplication that really does not make sense. But they're trained in a way where that's the way that it thinks. And then at the end, when it's finally ready to reproduce a response, it can then convert it back from that mathematical embedding domain to using what we call a decoder to then decode an actual character that we then can understand.
So then that vector in embedding may correspond to, say, sentence of the same meaning in different languages, and they will have a similar number array.
Exactly. And that's actually where OpenAI got started, was in natural language processing, specifically for language translation, because they discovered, wow, you're representing the same concept, but it's just the first few input layers and output layers that really have to change.
I see.
The internal part can be the same.
So then the English and translated into embeddings, say Korean sentence embeddings, and so that I could understand. But what about when you take out and translate back to text? What happens there?
Explain it a little bit more.
So then, you just said that embeddings, the arrays of number are similar in if the two different language sentence has the same meaning.
Yep.
Right? Probably not the exact same array.
Sure. Similar though.
Yeah, but very similar. So probabilistically, it's very close.
Yep.
So then when you translate that into vector and put it into embedding, but then when you are trying to take it out, right, and convert that back to each own language, what happens there, that step?
Yeah, so that would be what's called the decoder step. And again, to some extent, this is where really, really smart people do what they'd call AI interpretability, where they're trying to decode and understand, because it's trained a little bit like a black box where these patterns emerge based off of the training data. They're not necessarily engineered, but that would be what we'd call a decoder step. And so maybe at the beginning, before you input the text from the one language, you also had like a phrase that said, convert this to Korean. Well, somewhere in the middle part, after the encoder, after that was encoded into the math, the numbers, in there was probably also some thread that carried along with it that had the instruction, when decoding, use this particular language feature, such as Korean, on the decoder layers. And again, that's kind of a very high level generalization, but it's still very much where the main AI part, the main embedding part, like you said, can mostly stay the same. And then at the output, that's just like the final few layers, oftentimes where the actual conversion to the language happens. And so then so what is happening there is, again, at the output step of any type of output from a language model, there is like a big, large dictionary, essentially. And that dictionary, what it can do is it will map the numbers, like a particular number that's output, and it'll say, okay, that output is associated with this particular character. And by doing that word after word after word, and just associating the output of the embedding to a particular word in the dictionary, that's how you actually create the final text, whether it's in English or Korean or Japanese or French, however.
Wow. So that step probably takes a lot of computing power then.
That's probably the least computing power.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What takes the most?
So in the way that numbers, like a sequence of words are compared against each other, is done in what's called an attention matrix. And that uses in the current AI models, that uses a large matrix, and every single element in the naive implementation, every single element in that matrix has to be multiplied by the other element. So just think, if you say, I am going to the store, that's 6 words. So if each word was a particular word embedding, then you have 36 different pieces of math to do. Now imagine if you upload the Declaration of Independence and say, continue this thing. Well, the Declaration of Independence is however many thousands of words long. In the native implementation, that's 1,000 times 1,000. That's 1,000,000 computations. And so obviously the amount of computing power scales up dramatically. But again, really, really smart people have come up with clever ways to optimize this, but that's what takes the most power.
I see. Now, that is a very different from what we are used to. So until this language model, large language model came about, where we type in or input things, store it in database, and then just retrieve it and compute and use it. So I would think there is some different things to think about in thinking about cybersecurity working with AI. Are there some of them?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest concern that a lot of people have that they'd bring up is, okay, when you go to ChatGPT or any other, your favorite AI model, you are oftentimes putting in your prompt about your personal question, similar to Google, right? A lot of people don't have an issue of that.
Yeah.
Some people do. But the bigger issue comes when you are trying to give more context, right? Like let's say you had some clinical problem. Well, the best way to get the best answer is to also upload your medical history and your records, right? And to do that, the best way to do that is to, add that to your ChatGPT or your AI model and give it that. And that's sending all your data to those cloud providers. So a lot of people think that, okay, when I'm giving my AI to the language model, is it training on my data? And that's a big misconception that people have. Because what happens in the regular language model, what happens is when you give it your text, whatever it is, your medical history and your question, all those texts get sent through an embedder or an embedding mechanism. And then the language model isn't training on, like right then and right there when you send it, these AI models are not training on your text. All what it's trying to do, based off of the information in the text you give it, it's trying to predict what would be the best next word to output, what would be the right answer to response. So simply stated, if you send your data just to an AI language model, there's nothing saved. The model itself is not designed or engineered to save your information. However, when you do send your information to like ChatGPT or Gemini or Grok, they might have some other engineering things where they do save your chats, aside from the language model itself. And that's where like when you use a lot of these apps, they have like the memory feature. And that's saving your chat just like a normal database. And that may be where the security comes in, because then they can use those chats to actually train future models. But when you're actually using the AI model, like just for your regular prompt, the AI model itself is not actually training on your data.
Okay. Or my data would not change anything about the embedding.
It would not change anything about the specific embedding.
I see.
Yes, that is correct. Now, I will say that's kind of a little bit of a nuanced take, because the way that a lot of people use it, oftentimes there will be what's called prompt injection or memory injection, which is essentially in the prompt that gets sent to the AI embedding, there's some additional context saying, oh, Joseph talked about this yesterday. We're going to include that. You don't see that because that's part of their engineering. It makes you feel more personable, right? Because you say, oh, it remembers me. But the AI model itself is not being changed. It's just including that in the prompt on the back end, so you don't see it. And that's where it maybe seems like it knows me. The AI model itself does not. But the way the information that it is being given may.
So then, as long as my input of my, let's say, information, as long as that can be isolated in the database and just pay attention to where my data goes and store it securely, my data should be safe, or are there some other things to be considered?
Right. I mean, I guess along with basic cybersecurity principles, if you have your data, if you know your data storage is safe, and you use what's called a ZDR model, I'll explain that in a second. You should be, as far as the law goes, guaranteed that yours data is secure as you have made your database. What a ZDR is, it's called a zero data retention. And a lot of companies have policies or endpoints that you can use, like OpenAI has it, Google has it. And essentially what they're saying is, if you send your request to the AI model to our endpoint, we promise we will not store this. As soon as you get your response back from the AI model, we store nothing. So nothing stays on their server. And then the nice thing about that is if you have your own secure data storage and you use a ZDR, as much as you're willing to trust their promise to not store the data, then everything is only stored in your database.
I see. In that example, will the AI experience such that it remembers our past conversation? Or will it be, if the zero data retention policy is applied, that it's not going to remember last interaction with my data?
Yeah. So again, if the ZDR applies, it will not remember anything unless you include it in the information that you send to it. Yeah. So like if you physically yourself store it and say, this is what we talked about last time, then it will. But then that kind of defeats the purpose, right?
Right. Yes. In my own experience, when the last conversation was recorded and remembered, I felt like it was so much easier interaction, and I felt like I appreciated the fact that the AI system remembered the last conversation, so that I don't have to repeat it. Yeah. So that felt very different.
It does. It makes it not even feel more personable, but it saves so much time.
Right.
Because you're not trying to go back and re-explain everything. Yeah.
Okay. So then, in light of all that, what do you think would be some of the things to consider when clinic or hospital system are trying to adopt AI system into their existing electronic health record system?
Yeah, that's a really valid concern. On the security standpoint, I would say do not use your ChatGPT free accounts. And then also on a policy standpoint, if you don't provide your employees with ChatGPT accounts or some other AI account, there's a very high chance that they'll just use their own, which is probably way worse. So in my opinion, from what I've seen, I would highly recommend getting like an enterprise or business plan, because those allow for what I mentioned, those ZDR endpoints if you want. But maybe you don't necessarily need ZDR, you trust ChatGPT, but you can assign BAAs with some of these different providers to then have an association saying, hey, we're going to store this data in a HIPAA compliant manner. And then you can also set policy controls where you say after 30 days, these chats will get deleted, or maybe even after 0 days, without having to go through the process of manually configuring a ZDR.
So you just spoke about two different models where you use, first one is using third-party AI platform like ChatGPT or Grok, versus the enterprise system where that embeddings are within their IT system. Can you go over what are the differences about the cost differentials, and can small to medium size practice afford that type of service versus pluses and minuses?
Sure, yeah. I guess for what I was specifically referring to in that original one, or just a second ago, was they have like the business plan, but I think what you're referring to is they also have the option to deploy your own AI. I think some of the bigger hospitals and bigger players, they have exclusive licenses with OpenAI or Anthropic, where they then I don't know how it all works, but they then clone the model that powers ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, and then they use it in their own servers with some sort of an OpenAI executive to kind of just manage it, make sure that they're not selling it to China. But with that, as an alternative, you could also use like a local model or an open source model, which means that, okay, so you have your AI, it can process the embeddings, but you own the model weights itself. So these embeddings, they're what we call weights, a lot of different numbers put together. And so ChatGPT, Gemini, Anthropic, they're what you call closed source. They not anyone can just go and download them and use them. Now, an open source model, they're not going to be the best of the other ones, but they're very, very close. They're not too far behind. Very good enough for 99% of what you need it for. And so what you can do there is if you have a hardware person, they can set it up, put it on your hardware. And the nice thing about that is you don't need any internet at all. And that's the best form of cybersecurity is no internet, because if there's no internet, no one can get in unless they physically come to your place and break in with like an axe and a hammer. But
I believe there was a study from Harvard last year that compared the open source versus closed source in clinical questioning. And I mean, it was closed source was better, but the open source one was not too far behind.
Sure.
So, for most of the clinical activities, they concluded that it might be good enough.
Well, I mean, just think back to GPT-4 from 3 years ago. A lot of people, even physicians, like you even attested to GPT 3.5 saying, wow, this is really good. Yeah. Wasn't perfect by any means, but good enough for probably a good percentage of cases, right? Yeah. And now the closed source has gone way far past it. And I will say, whatever the best was for closed source 6 months ago, that's about how good the open source is right now. So just think of what model you were using in December of last year. You probably were. It was probably more than good enough for your use cases. Yeah. Well, now the open source are going to be just as good as that.
Oh, I see.
That's been the trend.
Yeah, I mean, so it looks like yes, there are additional issues in terms of cybersecurity that the clinic owners or IT administrators need to think about in adopting AI system. Yep. But it's not impossible, and as long as you keep things in check and keep in mind of different provisions that you need to make, if the cybersecurity and privacy are not too huge a jump from the previous cybersecurity measures.
I agree. I'll agree with one caveat here, and this is not even AI. It's AI related, but doesn't involve necessarily healthcare. The biggest concern I think people have come with cybersecurity and AI is not so much about how to protect the data of people who are using AI, as much as it is, okay, if someone can train a very, very, very powerful AI, can it crack current cybersecurity measures? And that's kind of an entirely different topic than just healthcare and AI. That's like a whole cybersecurity realm topic in general. There's a new model by Anthropic called Mythos, and it's been making a few headlines in the last month or two because they have been deploying it in secret, or not in secret, but with limited access to different companies, so that way they can get ahead of their game and update security measures. And this AI model has been able to find some vulnerabilities in commonly used packages already in the coding world, which is good. I'm glad that they're doing this with due diligence, because if they just gave it out to anyone right now, there could be a potential for a lot of harm, possibly. But that's where it's just another reminder to do your due diligence, follow best practices for cybersecurity, and you should still be okay. And then just stay up to date on where your vulnerabilities may lie on the coding realm.
Yeah, but that's any system,
and that's IT any system, not even regarding AI. Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Well, that about wraps up today's session, and I really thank you for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thanks for your questions.
Yeah. And if you have a question or comment, please list it on the comment section, and we'll try to answer as much as possible. Thank you.